Quality food service starts with the best ingredients, passion, hard work, the right specialist, and a solid plan. But a plan is not enough. What about your policy, your mission, or creating a vision? Who is capable of helping you with the best hospitality decisions? A specialist. But a specialist on its own can't know everything, can't be everywhere, can't know all specs, can't have all the time, can't give you all the support you need, can't be all over the world, can't guarantee the best quality, and can't make the best decisions. But our FCSI consultants, together with our network, our knowledge, our connections and our system, they know everything. Our management and design consultants are everywhere. They know all the specs and all the newest innovations. They have all the time. They can give you the support you need. Together, they have all the experiences they need to help you make the best decisions. Together, we know the industry. Together, we can be all over the world and give strong independent advice to fulfill your solid plan and secure your future. FCSI is about products, projects, but most of all, about people. Together, we share, we support, we inspire. FCSI.
So we are extremely pleased to introduce to you today Dr. Sam Mudie as our keynote speaker for this event. Sam is the Director of Consultancy Services at HESS that has led on sustainability and energy reduction strategies for over 7,000 UK hospitality venues. She's recognised for her doctoral research on energy reduction in commercial catering and has published 8 award-winning papers. Her work has driven successful energy-saving initiatives, resulting in significant cost savings. Recently, she created the Food Service Carbon Professional course, FCP, to promote sustainability in the food service sector. So, good morning, Sam. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you very much, Julian.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Sam, I'm just going to hand it all over to you, and yeah, off we go.
Well, thank you very much, Julian. Welcome, everybody, early in the morning for some of us. As Julian says, I'm Sam Mudie. I've got a couple of specific energy reduction projects to talk about today, and I'm going to start off with sort of my PhD and what that was on. So I'll talk about the context of the research that I did at the University of Reading, a little bit about measurement of energy, a bit about menu modelling, which is about a quarter of my PhD, a little bit about behaviour change, because that seems to be really quite popular at the moment, and then a little bit more about hospitality, energy saving and sustainability, the consultancy that me and my doctorate supervisor started once we had graduated and finished up the research. So essentially, back in 2011, which was further away in the past than I like to think it was, Mitchells & Butlers, one of the largest UK operators of pubs and restaurants, had a problem, didn't really understand what was going to happen in the sort of net zero world around kitchens. What did kitchens of the future look like 50 years hence? The research question that they had was very much about the kitchens. So to try to forget about the building, the envelope, the gas heating, the gas hot water, those sorts of things, really focus on the cooking methodology. We worked with, they took their question out to lots of different universities around the country, and they found the University of Reading was best placed to help them. They had the Technologies for Sustainable Built Environment Centre, and worked with something called the Association of Engineering Doctorates as well. So it was very sort of focused on the engineering side of things. At the time, and this is quite out of date now, obviously, but just to try to let you know what it was actually like, Mitchells & Butlers had sort of 16, 17 brands at the time. They had about 1,450 sites. And they had done quite a lot already. They were very sector leading at the time. So they already had minimum energy standards, LED lighting, demand controlled ventilation, lots of bits and pieces like that. And they did have a bill of about £80 million at the time for energy, gas and water. So quite the big deal. 40,000 members of staff as well. So lots of people to influence during the research. So obviously, being a PhD, the first thing that I had to do was literature, what was out there, sitting on Google. Actually, it feels quite nice for me today because I haven't had much interaction with the FCSI in the last few years, but it was one of the first places I went. So as a lowly sort of undergraduate, I went and said, please help me with this. I don't know where to start. And same with the FEA, actually. So what I found first was that energy prices were obviously about to go up by a lot in the next 10 years or so. The UK had made their legally binding net zero carbon commitments. And CIBSE, the Chartered Institute for Building Services Engineering in the UK, had done a little bit of work with the Carbon Trust and estimated the energy consumption of catering and food service to be 54.56 terawatt hours, so a few billion kilowatt hours from hotel, catering, restaurant buildings. Putting that against the food carbon impact in agriculture and food retail, supermarkets and things, catering was actually the same as the rest of the chain put together in terms of energy use. So if you look at it for carbon, agriculture takes the lion's share with its sort of land use change and its fertilizers and its methane. But in terms of energy use, the thing we actually pay for, catering was by far and away the largest chunk. In the UK, it's about the same as 14 million houses worth of electricity and gas. So it really was quite a big deal. And the other interesting thing I found out was at the time, absolutely nobody else in the world was doing any research in energy reduction specifically from food service, which was very daunting, but also quite a lucky break because academics love novel work. So I was very, very blessed to have this enormous problem, which was quite PR friendly compared with lots of my other colleagues doing about bricks and windows. So my research ended up panning out as the literature review at the start, and then a huge focus on benchmarking, because when I looked at the CIBSE guides and the Carbon Trust guides, they all produced benchmarking figures. Kitchens should use X amount of energy per meter squared, per turnover, per meal. But when you looked at the references, they came from guides from the 1990s, which hadn't been updated. They came from guides from the 1980s, which haven't been updated. And I finally, at the British Library, found the original research from 1976. So it had been 40 years since anybody collected new data on kitchens, which was mad because any low carbon town in the world is going to have some commercial or public food service element. So it did benchmarking. That took about a year, and I was very pleased to see some new figures being published by various British institutes with my figures since I graduated. Then a huge energy use study, which lasted about 2 years of monitoring everything, writing up the results, trying to do some modeling on the most efficient way of cooking a real food offer. And then I moved into some fat, oil and grease reduction for heat recovery, knowing that there's so much heat going to waste. How might we be able to capture that? So I was lucky enough to publish a paper in every aspect, and each one of them won an award or a presentation alongside won an award. So it was quite good research, I think. So starting at the start, the benchmarking stuff. Don't worry, you don't have to understand this. I like to show off at the beginning. But this basically shows the energy consumption of Mitchells and Butlers buildings when I started my PhD. So every dot on the graph on the left is energy use against the number of meals. So you can see a broad relationship between that, which is what you would expect. But I used to be a chemist, and I know what a really good relationship looks like on a graph, and it is not that. Here it should be much tighter across a line. What are these guys doing here, serving a fair amount of food but consuming 10 times the energy of somebody else? How are these guys performing? Doing quite well in the number of meals, but really using 10 times less energy than a lot of the others. So really, I just wanted to see the relationship at the beginning. I was lucky enough to work with some other amazing people in industry that had collected similar data but hadn't done much with it. So I ended up with a sample set of 20,000 pubs and restaurants for this analysis, which is about half of the UK's pubs at the time. So I split it out between pubs and restaurants to have a look if there was any different between sort of setup and category. there wasn't. If you serve food, you're going to be using a lot of energy. I compared it against the benchmarks that I mentioned before. I found that restaurants were using more than 10 times the energy of a supermarket. So really, really high consuming buildings, the highest in terms of energy consumption per meter squared from any commercial building in the CIBSE set. And then I sat about doing some really boring maths. This was the hardest and most dull part. This equation at the bottom is essentially a multivariate regression analysis, where I pulled all of the data that the companies had on jumbrellas, their sort of heating, patio heaters, from how many grills they had, the size, the turnover, the operating hours, and I regressed it all back using a program and with some assistance from people who know better maths than me, to pull out what were the variables that really mattered, what actually made a difference to energy use, and what had nothing to do with it at all. And this is the result at the bottom. It basically says energy use is equal to a number plus a number times the number of meals plus a number times turnover plus a number times kitchen size times operating hours times covers. And there you can work out the energy consumption of a building. And the reason why this was quite useful was because for a multi-site estate with like Mitchells and Butlers that at the time had 4 energy professionals working within it, targeting the ones for help, which ones are really doing badly. Chef says, I'm doing just fine. My pub's open longer than Joe Bloggs next door. My pub does breakfast. You can't tell me that I'm using too much energy because I have lots of equipment. I turn over more. There was football last night. We were open much later. And this sort of equation pulled all of those variables in, which meant I could say to them with confidence, actually, I've figured out that you are using much more energy than the rest of your sample set, which is half of the pubs in the UK, and something has gone wrong. It might be people, it might be settings, it might be equipment, but it helps us to target where they need the help. It also helps us to praise the ones who are delivering food at a fraction of the energy cost. So as boring as this was, it's really, really helpful for a multi-site operator to be able to target and praise and reward and find problems.
Mm.
And it should also say that this was where the benchmarking stuff came from. It actually helped us to build a table of sort of 5 levels of who was doing really well and who wasn't. So the next thing was the energy monitoring and measurements. So I found, shockingly, that of a British pub or restaurant, anywhere that serves food and drink, the kitchen will be about 63% of the energy consumption if the sample set is gas boiler and gas heating. These graphs here were made of 25 buildings that had very, very minute sub-metering. Everything in the building was sub-metered. So on the left, you've got it by area, and on the right, you've got it by function. So again, 42% was the cooking, and I think a lot of people were quite surprised to see 30% on the fridges and freezers and refrigeration. Didn't quite realise it was quite that much. As I say, in the UK, only the Carbon Trust and CIBSE had produced anything that had sub-metering, and it was very old, so it was shockingly quite out of date. Then the real useful stuff. How much does the equipment actually use? So I've updated this for the average kilowatt hour, pence per kilowatt hour of my clients today. So these are in today's prices. These aren't per equipment, so this is per category. So if you walk into a pub, they've got 4 fryers. The fryer row in the table will be all of the fryers together. Same with the combi ovens and refrigeration. Obviously for this, I remember it was about 14 fridges and freezers was the average amount in the pubs at the time. So you can see £102.90 spent before we've done anything yet. So per day, this is per day, 152 kilos of carbon per day for the restaurants. And you can see this in the UK, of course, went up dramatically last year to the point where my average client was spending £95,000 a year on energy consumption. It is almost always the second or third highest overhead. So staff first, then food and drink, then energy. Is the largest controllable cost. Can't really do much about what we pay staff. There are minimum wages. Can't really do too much about what we do about food sourcing. But energy, there's a lot of potential to save money. So I'll get there soon. The other thing that I had a look at was obviously the relationship between meals. Obviously, that was found to be important in my research, but in practical terms, you can see on the right, the graph has number of meals in orange, and then daily gas and electricity use as the other colours. And you can see that meals vary quite a lot, as you would expect, between, say, Sunday and Monday. Monday was a third of the meal turnover as it was on Sunday, but the gas exactly flat, exactly the same. It doesn't actually matter how many meals they serve. There's a lot of sort of embedded baseline energy in there. And in terms of practices, the graph on the left, you would really like to see a big lull, a massive drop in the sort of lull between lunch and dinner service, which you really don't see on average, even now, 10 years later. So we started to get into the real minutiae, looking at specific appliances. And one of the first things that struck me as the sort of beginning of my PhD, I spent a couple of weeks doing pot wash in some of the Mitchells and Butlers brands and just observing what was going on. It was quite clear that a lot of what I was seeing was going to be behaviour. So I submeted 14 salamanders. And I was privileged enough to know one very, very keen chef on behaviour change. He was really, really understood sort of his profit and loss. So I phoned him and said, "You're part of a study where I'm monitoring the average grill consumption. Can you do as well as you possibly can? I'm watching you. I've got all of your data on my screen right now. Turn it down, turn it off, do whatever you can to really reduce it and stay on your chefs. Keep watching them." And he is orange. So the average consumption is plotted for across the 14, is the grey line here. They use 49 kilowatt hours a day on the grill. Unbelievably, that is 17 pounds per day just for one salamander. This is one, but the average of one across 14 sites. Mr. Orange, he spent all of his time paying attention to what he was doing. He actually turned it off, which was quite novel, in the middle of the day, and he saved 71%. So I picked these sample size very carefully for the number of meals and the number of different appliances that they had in the kitchens. They were all the same brand, so they had the very same sort of template kitchen. So it was quite obvious that 70% of the energy consumption for some appliances was literally just behaviour, nothing to do with the food and nothing to do with the kit. They're all the same kit. So that was the first sort of indication I had of what I was going to do next after I'd assessed the consumption. The next one was specification. So all of these sites in this group of 14 had 4 small combi ovens. These graphs tell you a little bit more than just energy consumption, and apologies if I'm teaching anyone to suck eggs here, but what you'll see is this sort of general peak, just under 3,000 watts. That is just the oven holding temperature. The thermostat's coming on, it's saying, yep, we're at the right temperature, go down. Yep, we're at the right temperature, go down. And every peak over that you see is it being actually used. The door being open, put some food in, press the button, we're cooking a pie. And you can see that this one was fairly okay during the day. This one used a lot. This was their favourite. This one only really used 5 or 6 times, but on the same amount of time as everything else, from about an hour before lunch. And this one was only used once. So it was on all day, but it only got used once. So again, a bit of behaviour, but definitely interested in specification at this point, because they did not need that that combi oven. When we talked about it, it was there for Christmas, it was there for Mother's Day, it was there for when they really needed it. But there's no signage, no training, no idea about the fact that it should not have been on all day, costing them another £20. And then the final sort of insight from the big monitoring exercise was, of course, maintenance. So this is a walk-in fridge. I've seen a couple of people on the call today that may have already seen this in other presentations, but here you go again. This is a very ill fridge. Luckily, with monitoring and measurement of energy consumption, now I've got lots of systems that will send me reports. And I had genuinely an exact replica of this just a month ago. This is indicative of a fridge consuming something. Either the door is open or the compressor or the evaporator is about to break. So it should be just like the combi oven, where it comes on and says, yep, we're at the right temperature, and goes back to sleep again. This would happen if a door was being left open during a delivery, or a door seal had gone, or lots of different reasons. But you can see this one was behaving very poorly for quite some time before anybody noticed. Then you've got these massive overconsumptions. It cannot reach the temperature. It's working flat out. And shockingly, this did break down. It cost £4,000 worth of stock loss, having to shut, having to get reactive maintenance out at a much higher cost. It should have looked like this. The energy consumption is the area underneath the line. So it should look this really, really tight line. And now I get alerts for these kinds of things because monitoring's come on so much in the last few years. So I actually saved a site recently from this exact thing happening. Your freezer is suddenly consuming 50% more, has been for a day or two, it's going to blow up. So there you go. Behavior, maintenance, and specification were obviously the big deals. So what was I going to do about it? Well, it was quite clear that there was a lot of equipment going on. It was really difficult to choose. Should we be focusing on hobs? Should we be focusing on combi ovens? What should we be doing? And we kept sort of observing that all the equipment is on all the time. If you give it to chef, it will be on and firing away as much as possible most of the time. So I thought, well, it's one thing to buy a more efficient hob. Let's move from gas to induction. But it's another thing to think, well, do we even need the hob? All of my observations at the time said they did peas on it, which could have been done on a microwave or a combi oven or somewhere else. And eggs, which was exactly the same thing again, can be cracked and done in a combi oven, a few other things. So this particular brand, I thought, yeah, I'm not sure you really need a hob. We've been watching you for months now. But with the diversity and range of food being served, the various volumes, the capacities they need at the peak turnover, all the different appliance configurations, the variability of training, behavior, the maintenance strategies, and a lot of the operational choices, things like whether we do batch cooking or we cook to order and then we turn off all the prime cooking equipment, or we only ever cook from fresh and we get rid of all the hot holding equipment. Do we cook fresh or frozen food? Has anyone ever looked at that? And the answer was no at the time. No one had ever looked at these sort of operational management decisions. Absolutely nothing looking at these variables. So 2 years later, I'd created a model to input the food on a very, very granular level. So the 2 grams of parsley to garnish a mixed grill, 100 grams of chips, 100 grams of lamb cutlet, everything that you could put in to build a meal in the database. And then we moved to sales. So when were these things sold, at what time, and then scaled everything up and down for every half an hour slot during the day. A huge stakeholder consultation across academia and industry, and this is where I started talking to the FEA and the FCSI at the time, and some in the UK would know this as the DEFRA cut costs and carbon tool. So it was developed by me in the university, Mitchells and Butlers, DEFRA at the time, DEC at the time, and the Carbon Trust. And then we started, after we'd been able to build a database for the meals and look at the turnover and capacity and throughput of food, we then started to bring in the equipment and built models for the various features, things like advanced air circulation or insulation or energy saving fan motors, and the specification of equipment. This is the way the tool sort of looked from a mind mappy point of view. It was everything in the orange in the middle. Basically, it had the capacity to analyze cold storage from fresh and frozen, any food prep from sort of meat slices to vacuum packing to food mixers. Then obviously the prime cooking equipment, everything from hobs, ranges, salamander grills, char grills, toasters, even things like cutlery polishers towards the end, ware washing, hot holding, cooling, blast chillers, food waste removal, reheating, any of these things. But actually it also included ventilation and extraction, which was really, really important because a huge chunk of what you do on the energy and carbon side is going to have a massive impact around ventilation. So it's everything on this slide, sorry, except the bit in red. It did not have water heating or lighting in the model. Won't spend too long on this one, but this again just sort of maps out the way that we created the worksheets and the spreadsheet. I call it a model. It was a spreadsheet with over 1 million rows of data in it. So it was a glorified spreadsheet. Menu input, the number of meals served, the kitchen sort of use profile specification. Did the chef come in at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock? How many pieces of cutlery and crockery did they use on average, all of the information we needed for the calculations later, and of course the equipment database with all the features I mentioned. Lots of data transformations, extraction and ventilation data, refrigerant data. At the time, I see Lauren Hunter here, embodied data. I was absolutely certain that I was the only person in the world that had done some of the bills of materials at the time, but this was sort of 10 years ago now, so a lot of this is just not relevant anymore. The calculation worksheets, the use phase calculations, again, the embodied calculations, and the analysis of meals was all about that daily cooking distribution. What was served every half an hour and what was that made up from? And that was important because the capacities were pieces of equipment under or overutilized. The hot finishing demand, preparation demand per hour, and all of this came down to the very last sheet, which was behavior strategy. So have we got maximum operation? Is the default everything on in the morning right up until the end of service? Then something in the middle, chefs have had some training, there's some awareness, they turn some things down in quiet periods. And then there was sort of the top gold standard of behavior strategy 4, which was either mirrors things like induction that are generally only on, or microwaves when they're only on when they're cooking, and things like really intense, decent sensors, or very, very mindful chefs that are turning stuff down and off. So the sort of absolute minimum that you could be using with given the food demand. And at the end, it just spat out 3 results: total energy, total cost, and total emissions. It did it per operation, but also per part of the menu and per equipment. So these are the results. For the sponsoring company, we achieved 58% savings, looking at 8 different setups for the kitchen. So again, this is based on real data, real monitored data. For Mitchells and Butlers at the time, I won't beat around the bush, that is who I was working with, 37 million kilowatt hours saved from the best of the scenarios, which was this one on the right. So we decided to replace freezing with fresh. We replaced the char grill with 2 high efficiency microwave steam combi ovens. We replaced the fryers, and we removed the hob entirely because they weren't using it, freeing up lots of space, obviously reducing the cook line dramatically and having a huge impact on the ventilation as well. So 37 million kilowatt hours is 10 million kilos of carbon dioxide, and 13 million pounds per year of savings. And this was for one brand. So one brand with 300 sites. So starting to look at what it would be across the whole of the operator. They had about 1,500 sites at the time, 121 million pounds of savings. Across the whole sector, 50,000 pubs, 6 billion pounds worth of savings. So this again is genuine, published, peer-reviewed academic data showing this enormous saving potential. I did not change anything from the menu. Well, I was expecting at the start, way back when we did the stakeholder consultation, perhaps I'd need to tweak a few things. If maybe one of their best sellers was the only thing using that steamer or the only thing using that hob, maybe I might have to change the menu. But it didn't change the menu at all. We could cook everything in the same demand, the same turnover, just slightly differently, and reduce that cook line all the way down. So this was quite well received, this one, and it was very, very interesting work. Lots of arguments at the time. We can't do eggs in the combi oven because our customers in our focus group say that eggs that have come out of a combi oven look like McDonald's. They're all very uniform. We don't want that. So we picked up the tray and we bashed it against the side a little bit so that they're all different shapes, and then cooked it and said, oh, now they look really different, and it's cost about 1p per egg to cook it instead of 20. So it was a lot of thinking outside the box and a lot of fun. So I graduated in 2017. It was the worst time to be an energy professional in the UK. The coalition government had dismantled everything. Energy wasn't on the public radar at all. It wasn't on the government's radar. No one wanted to give me a job. So me and my former supervisor, who was Director of Energy and Sustainability at Mitchells and Butlers, and our project manager, set up Hospitality Energy Saving. I was absolutely convinced in the behaviour change side of things. It's very, very cheap. It can be sustainable. If you build in motivation and momentum into a campaign, we know that a huge chunk of this is behaviour. So can we do this in real life? I know many chefs, and I really don't want to be take anyone to take offence, but there is definitely a specific challenge with certain chefs. It is a horrible environment a lot of the time. It's hot and humid and cold at the same time. It's not designed for comfort. There are no personal space heaters. Of course, they're rubbing their hands and holding them over a grill on a November morning. Appliances need to be in a constant state of readiness because delivering the food ASAP, guest satisfaction and comfort is the number one priority, not energy saving. There is a bit of a specific culture. I've done some personality traits, some generational studies, and there are key sort of motivators and key issues around chefs. I won't use the words volatile and toxic, but there's definitely a sort of a stereotype there. And there is high attrition and high staff turnover. So the boards at certain companies say, well, we're not going to invest loads of money in training our staff and providing incentives. Why would we? They're only going to be here for the summer. So there was a lack of willingness to invest in staff from the top down. So a lot of other challenges about behaviour. So we approached this behaviour change campaign, did our research and insights. That was all from the PhD. Measurement and verification. How can we measure a behaviour change programme to prove the results? That was quite a challenge. So the initial research was still pretty substantial. We started the programme with 4 workshops, and we looked at the business culture. We did a gap analysis. We looked at strategies, skills, recognition, rewards, what was going on at the time, how much do people know, personality types, generation, skills, all of these kinds of things. Then we progressed, that was all in sort of engaging fun workshops, trying to pick people to work together that were very different, trying to find groups of people that were very similar, giving them problems and just observing things. Then we started to deliver training, specific climate change, climate literacy stuff, then very specific energy consumption stuff, all in line with the brands that they worked with, because we do a lot of monitoring and sub-metering, so giving them data that was meaningful to their brand and their operation, and specifically training them on the methods we were using to monitor and verify the stuff, giving them that equation and saying, if we tell you your energy use is too high or it's really low, it is based on all these variables. Don't worry, we understand that you are bigger than your pub next door, you are open longer. So giving them that kind of training so they knew they could trust a sort of behaviour change competition results. Then we moved into the fun part, the interventions, the competitions, league tables, a big ideas competition, energy champions, workshops, games, rewards, keeping energy on the agenda throughout the entire organisation, and lots of communications stuff around it as well. Word on communications, if you're working with chefs, then there's something called social proof. So really presenting someone who is doing very well and, you know, don't you want to be just like him, is much better than the guilt trip and the shaming and blaming. So you see quite a lot of our communications at the time will say, our best bar staff, always pack the bar fridges with cold product from the cellar, our best ones. Already 80% of chefs are turning things down, not 20% of you are rubbish. About 80% of you are doing really well. 72% of managers always. These kinds of things. Again, I was very privileged that I worked in an academic department where lots of psychologists were giving me their research. So we started to put KPIs in contracts, which was a very innovative and scary process, drawing up heads of terms for contract catering staff, for giving training, and it having the ability to have a stick as well as a carrot, to say even just one line in a contract that says we are an energy conscious company and we expect our staff to be so too. If we're doing monitoring, we find the same people are leaving stuff on overnight, we have a tool to call them up on it, not sack them, not discipline them, but at least just say this is something the company cares about. So a lot of this stuff was about the people side of things. We managed to get energy on the agenda for any monthly meeting across the entire organisation of 1,000 pubs, and we often gave small rewards. So we would go around doing energy audits, we'd have a case of wine in the boot, we would have chocolates, and if we saw something going really well, we would just give it to people. We weren't too explicit with it, we just wanted other people to talk about it. Oh, you got some wine? Where did you get that from? What did you do? So a little bit more on the interventions. This company had a massive head office with 400 people in Birmingham. We put annoying alarms in the lifts to encourage people to use the stairs. We did push buttons when taking the stairs, so if they got the token, then they could get a free coffee out of it. We did a lot of monthly themes, which is something that we still do now for our clients. So in the winter, or we're coming up to autumn, we'll do something about the British summertime clock change, setting all of your timers correctly. In the winter, it will be about heating. In the summer, it will be about air conditioning. And in between, we'll have dedicated communications on salamanders for a week, or heat lamps for a week, or bar fridges. So giving it those little chunks, we find that doing energy audits, we'll find 50 odd things. It's much more sustainable to give them one action a week than it ever is to present them 50 things. Signage, anything to do with posters or stickers, it needs to change frequently to avoid it becoming wallpaper and continuing to be engaging. And in terms of rewards, we spent about £23,000 on this training and rewards. So we bought a few iPads, we had staff parties, we had days out. We empowered the security guards to put raspberries on the keyboards of people who had not turned their appliances off overnight. Eventually, we progressed to bits of coal. So we literally just left little bits of coal on people's desks if they had left their PCs on overnight. And people who turned them off got little chocolates. But again, it wasn't explicit. People would just talk about it, and it made them remember the campaign and the sort of little behavioural tweaks. And actually, we found that obviously, the most encouraging incentive is money. If you tell people they will get a bonus, they will behave better. Holiday was also quite good. You can have a day off. And actually, parking permits. That office in Birmingham, giving somebody a parking permit for being the winner that week on reducing energy consumption overnight went down very well. So the results of the year's behaviour change campaign, we had pledge cards at the beginning from the initial workshops, which we posted back to participants. So we didn't really hold them account. It was their own conscience. So these are the things you said you would do a year ago. How have you got on? How are you feeling about that? Photos of the board members with their pledges circulated. Some of them did well, some of them didn't, but that definitely created quite a lot of laughs. We got several research awards. For this one, I got the CIBSE's Most Valuable Contribution to the Art and Science of Building Service Engineering, one of the largest titles that I've ever got. So they loved the principles of sort of behaviour change campaigns for chefs. We did surveys at the beginning and the end, this gap analysis to show progress in all areas around sort of skills, recognition, engagement. We saved 20% of energy in the year. 90 million kilowatt hours, and it was £1 million worth of savings in just the first 3 months and 10 million over the year. So I still come up against people all the time that say, oh, behavior change, it's not going to work. It's not sustainable. It won't have lasting progress and results. But would you rather save £1 million in 3 months and then nothing, or nothing at all? And I find this is sustainable. If you build momentum and interesting activities in for the long term and get people along for the ride, it really can be the highest return on investment project that you ever deliver. So definitely encourage people to look at behaviour change for chefs. And finally, I'll just wrap up with talking just shamelessly a little bit more about what tests do. So we are all hospitality professionals. Me and my two co-directors have obviously come from Mitchells and Butlers. Between us, we were there for 60 years. So we had quite a lot of experience with one operator, but it has now been 6 years since we set up Hospitality Energy Saving, and even our office manager used to work for a large multinational fast food chain. We've got head chefs, we've got head chefs from boarding schools, from hospitals. Even our gas engineer and our electricians have only ever worked in hospitality, leisure centres and food service. So we're a big team of hospitality professionals. I find it's easier to train them in energy than it is to train energy managers in hospitality. We do energy management, we do net zero and sustainability plans, we do weird and wonderful consulting projects, we do project management, and we do compliance. But our major service is really that energy management. It is going into businesses at 5-6 o'clock in the morning, watching the cleaners turn everything on to help the chefs, extraction going on at 5 o'clock in the morning, all the way up until watching the security guards leave the lights on overnight on purpose. So we'll go in and watch the operation for usually a whole day and write a bespoke report about it. And then we generally pride ourselves on taking action when we're there. So instead of just give them a list, we would say, well, actually, we found that your toilet extract was on overnight. We changed the settings on your kitchen extract because we found it was on for 4 hours too long. We've seen your boiler time clock is still operating on British summertime, so we've changed that. And then we'll take the general manager or duty manager around, and we'll show them all the opportunities we found and do a little bit of analysis on the before and after if they are lucky enough to have some data. This is one that did have some data. So last year I visited, again, a very large pub chain in the UK with 600 sites, and we saved them £50,000 from one visit. So the guys said to us there had been a weird noise, sounded very much like a fan, found a switch and said, have you ever touched this switch before? And they said, no, we're a bit scared to touch that, don't know what it is. Shockingly, the noise went off and they had a massive air handling unit that was unnecessary going for 5 years, and it cost them £50,000 a year in all of that time. So we do regularly pay for ourselves. I think the average savings that we find are £25,000 a year worth of opportunity. That's the average. And we'll usually make about 4 grand's worth of savings from free actions while we're there. Net zero carbon strategies. Obviously, I started my PhD long before net zero carbon was a thing, but I feel like that's what I've been doing my whole career. So we produce net zero carbon plans. I'd like to think that we go into the absolute minutiae, from the warewashing chemicals to the oil footprints, to the sensors, to the impact of planned preventative maintenance. And this is the sort of thing that we would do to get all the way down to net zero, from your quick wins to your strategic projects. And we don't try to talk about offsetting particularly, but it is an important part of the process as long as it's done well. I pride myself on my guides. I've got a lot of guides. As I said, I really like the idea of giving one thing a week to really build sustainable change, rather than there's this enormous list of problems that you must solve. So we've got 52 that we do weekly. Actually, I think we've got 65, and we just mix it up each year. And then quite a number of free guides that you can download from our website. I'll have a little word on electrification. I think that we've changed so much in the last 2 years since the energy crisis and the war in Russia. Suddenly people actually care about this kind of stuff. And I think that most people understand now that if you do something like electrification, the benefits could be enormous outside of energy use. The challenges are also enormous outside of energy use, of course, but there is an argument for doing the right thing. Gas will always be gas. It doesn't matter if it's renewable, it still burns the carbon dioxide. It does matter. It's better, but it's not great. Electricity will get more and more less and less carbon intensive as the time goes on. So there is an argument for just doing the right thing. Alongside that, you've obviously got your reputational benefits if you are not greenwashing and you are sort of putting your data where your mouth is. Health, it's amazing how in the last few years since COVID, indoor air quality research is really showing the negative impacts of burning gas. I do believe that our children in sort of 10 years time will grow up and say, you used to burn fossil fuels in your house to cook on, and they just blows your mind how much nasty stuff comes out of these things, and it's like it's come out of nowhere the last few years. Even in Australia, they're saying 10% of childhood asthmas are from burning gas to cook on a range or a hob. Well-being, obviously, it's much nicer environment when you haven't got that sort of sensible latent heat everywhere in your face. Regulatory benefits, there are multiple places, Austria, Germany, California, that are all looking or have enacted bans on new gas connections. There's an argument for consistency of product, so a lot of electrified appliances are a little bit more technology sort of intense. That's got some problems from the embodied carbon side of things, rare earth metals, lots of electronics, but all of my research, the operational carbon, the in-use carbon, it can be 95% of the lifetime carbon. So you can have sort of much more improved functionality, also gives a more consistent product a lot of the time. Gas price uncertainty is enormous, and obviously you're about less likely for things to catch fire. So there's quite a few reduced operational issues around gas interlocks and things like that. So this was a study I did about 1.5 years ago now for one of the world's largest construction firms doing mixed-use buildings of commercial and retail establishments. There seems to be, when a lot of organisations look at electrification, they consider like-for-like replacements. So this was just one where they asked me to do a like-for-like replacement. So we have these appliances, 3 gas fryers, 1 4-burner hob, replaced with the best in class for electrified appliances. That was the brief. So we got the baseline energy costs of 67 grand a year. And then looking at the electrified carbon energy and cost. So there, it's almost cost neutral. It has saved a bit. It saved 9% for this establishment. But because of the carbon intensities, the emission reductions were 40% and the energy reduction was 41%. So if you're on a net zero carbon plan, you may not save a lot of money doing this, but you will save a lot of carbon and benefit from all the things on the previous slide. The real thing is when you look at the individual appliances, some appliance categories, you just do not get the efficiency savings from moving to electric. So replace these particular gas fryers, and they are all different depending on the location and the size of the burner tubes and things. The gas fryer will just go up. In the UK, electricity is significantly more than gas, so sometimes sort of 20 times the amounts depending on what tariff you're on. So for some of these things you won't get the efficiency sort of boost. You almost always do in hobs though. So you can see here that the cost of the induction hob compared with the gas was 2 grand a year. But where you always see savings is the ventilation. So if this is a deep retrofit or it's a new build, then it always comes down to that ventilation. You always save more, generally save more on the ventilation than you might do on some of the appliances. So overall, it came down to £6,000 savings. But this is not what my menu modeling or my PhD learnings told me to do. Do not replace like for like. Look at the menu. What do you actually need? Try to get around the chef. I need that, and that, and look at the most efficient way of cooking. So when we did this work for Lend-Lease, I said, you know what, for free, I will show you what else you can do. They had a big net zero carbon plan, this huge globally, really flashy, nice plan, but they did not know how to handle their food and beverage tenants. Was electrification going to put them off being able to rent their spaces? So I started to look at the menu modeling side of things, looked at what the establishment served over the last year or so, and what could we do about reducing the appliances. Often I take the brands off of these things, but I actually haven't today. So if we removed the oven, hob, twin basket fryer, grill, salamander, microwave and toaster and replaced it with just these 2 things, then the capital cost, of course, goes up 33% more, £10,000 more, almost exactly. The energy consumption, of course, was reduced by 37%. So you've made huge savings there, 12,000 already. But then there's the other impacts of the staff, the time it takes to clean something with gas, the volatility of the fats burning all over things is often quite troubling, takes a long time, costs more chemicals. So the yearly running cost was £1,000 cheaper for the sort of energy minimized kitchen. And over the 5 years, it was 95,000, nearly £96,000 saved per site. And this is an organisation with 100,000 sites. So it is quite enormous. I've broken down some of the capital costs there. And this is just a screenshot from one of the bits of analysis. We've also got sort of hammered home the environmental and healthy environment. I'm aware I've only got 2 minutes left. So there's obviously a lot of argument about electrification. Every time without fail, there is at least one chef. I can't cook on electric. I'm not going to do this. I will quit. I've had that a couple of times. I'll quit if you do this. And same chef, almost every time after just a 2-week trial, will come back and say, oh, you can't take the induction away from me. I need it. I hate cleaning the old one. And they've turned around quite quickly. But we produce a lot of guides to sort of hold hands and do workshops and try and bring them along for the ride, tell them what we're doing. And I've got quite a good collection now of famous chefs all over the world cooking their pittas and their lok laks and their Asian cuisine on induction stuff and doing videos for it and distributing them. Julian mentions the FEA's Food Service Carbon Professional course. It's quite intense. It's definitely a lot more technical than what I've gone through today, and it's generally sort of broken down into 4 modules: core module, cooking and warming equipment, refrigeration and warewashing, and each of them goes through these 4 stages of the scope and application of the equipment, how they work, the sort of principles of heat transfer or refrigeration or whatever it is, the legislation and regulation, which is wouldn't do that one too close to bedtime, but important nonetheless, and life cycle emissions. And this is where I think for the first time, and I'm right on the cusp of publishing it as my most recent academic paper, I have got the full life cycle emissions of a number of appliances, again, ranging from sort of 50% being embodied and 50% being in use, up to the sort of average is about 70 in use and 30% embodied carbon. So we've got a few of those going on. This is a recent project of a private members club, which has 6 restaurants throughout. Obviously, being sort of an engineering doctorate, I'm quite interested in other things like solar thermal heating, heat pumps, solar PV, natural ventilation, building fabrics. I did an awful lot of that sort of heat recovery stuff in the first few years of my PhD. So we've sort of moved to do a little bit more of working with mechanical, electrical, power engineering consultants, and doing a bit more of the wider sustainability stuff, obviously promoting social value and supporting biodiversity and all the rest. So we've got a number of design and build projects as well now for catering. I also work with Reading University. So only 2 months ago, I quit my job as head of sustainability there. We won the first place in the University League for People and Planet for the #1 most sustainable organisation in education in the country. Thought that was probably a good time to leave. I'm happy to get them there, but maintaining that is going to be a struggle. So full time now at Hairst after doing both the jobs for the last 7 years, and obviously there has given me a huge opportunity. We've won a £3.3 million grant for public sector decarbonisation. So we've spent a lot of money, a couple of £1 million on a heat pump that does 40% of the gas across a massive university. We've won Net Zero Strategy of the Year, done a lot of ground source water source heat pumps tapping into the aquifer under the University of Reading, lots of solar and loads of energy efficiency projects. But you can generally always find me in the kitchen with our hospitality staff. And just to summarise, been through a lot today. I appreciate I talk quite fast, so it's good that Julian has recorded it. Improved monitoring and targeting, it's got to start there. I now sit on a database of about 7,000 appliances. So if anybody ever needed some energy data, then do get in touch. Behavior change campaigns, don't overlook them. It's so important to bring the people along for the ride. Technology is not going to work without buy-in from the staff. Improved maintenance is always there. Anything that we can do about maintaining the equipment. Replacements and retrofits, really consider what you need and what you cook. You might end up with a much smaller kitchen footprint, a much bigger front of house, more profit there as well. And really, yeah, just consider those sort of low energy kitchen templates. Thank you very much.
Wow, Sam, that was that was electrifying. Thank you very much. Can I just say that I've just finished that formula you had on earlier?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and it was correct.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So well done there. So many takeaways there, Sam. I don't know where to start, really. We've got a few questions that have come through, but we've learned so much today. I'm going to do a bit of a capture here. I would say my biggest takeaway is the next time we're talking to a client about building their new kitchen. So I've got a new approach now. The approach is, okay, so okay, what are you cooking? What are your volumes? How are you going to serve the food? Give us your story, Mr. Chef. What is your piece de resistance product, etc. And then I'm going to take that information. Then I'm going to go back to the chef and interrogate them. Well, how do you think you're going to cook that? And then have that. I've called it the environmental intervention section of kitchen design planning. Do you like that?
Yes, love it.
So once you've then done that pre-menu design, go through it all. Can it be cooked differently, different methods, really, and you're educating the kitchen team while you're doing that. And then you go back to your kitchen design and knock it up. So I would say that's the most useful course I've ever been on in 40 years of being a chef. So thank you very much. Yeah, so we've a few questions here. I say we haven't got a heap of time. and appreciate that any questions that do come through via online or anything that comes through via Esther or myself or Sam following this event, we may do some homework and get an email response to you in due course. But just a couple of quick questions then, Sam. I mean, you mentioned greenwashing earlier, which is great. So how can hospitality businesses communicate their sustainability efforts to guests and customers without it appearing as greenwashing?
Well, there are some pretty clear guidance on the Competition for Markets Authority, the CMA's website in the UK, but really it just comes down to the data. It's much easier than it used to be to submeter and publish data. When I was doing this, it was £10,000 per distribution board. You could spend £20,000 on submetering appliances, but I work with 8 providers of monitoring, and now they're £600. It's amazing how quickly these things have come on. When you've got the data and it's been sort of, thoroughly assessed and looked at, I'm not saying everyone needs to do it from an academic point of view with that kind of baseline, but it would be handy if you can back it up then and provide evidence. That is really your best starting point. Everybody makes mistakes with these things. It's very, very easy to have a broad statement and then somebody come along, say, oh, you've not done this and you've not done that, and then now people are getting to the point where they're too scared to do anything, or they're certainly too scared to say anything. So really, I think it needs to be acknowledging that this is an enormous journey. It never really ends, because even if you offset something, the rules around that and doing that sensibly are reduced as far as you can. Every year, new technology comes online that needs to be assessed and put into the plan. So I think really it's acknowledging that nothing's perfect and having data to back it up.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, thank you, Sam. We've got a question in here from York. What tasks does this entail for kitchen appliance manufacturers, and how can AI provide support in the future? Great question, York.
Yes, that is a good one.
Thank you.
So for kitchen appliance manufacturers, I think it really comes down to that training. This is why a lot of my focus in the next couple of months is developing the training that we already do, to try and make it shorter and me talk less and get a few more or definitely promote the interactive workshops that we do. So it comes down to the people that sell the equipment understanding where the limitations are, how much it's likely to use in real world, real door openings, real sort of maintenance strategies. And like I say, the limitations on that as well. Then there's obviously the design components for the manufacturers as well. So considering that embodied carbon, making it as easy as possible to maintain something and reuse it and improve it as much as you can in its service life. But really, it comes down to that training. So if manufacturers have got data on energy consumption, be with things in a certain use case, training people in that use case is the only way to realize it. And then from my point of view, I'm starting to get into sort of chefs' colleges now, get them while they're young and keen, and try to give them the tools to understand the impact of what they do. And in terms of AI, my mind is blown. I've only got into it in the last year myself. I was a little bit slow compared with some of my friends. And I'm still sort of tapping into how we can do that, particularly with the data analysis. So if you imagine the average pub in my sample set has 400 appliances, that's a lot of data to go through. And I do all of that manually with my 2 data analysts. So we are looking now at how we can use AI to make the data analysis bit a little bit slicker, cheaper.
Yeah. Excellent, fantastic. Actually, that reminds me, we're looking at doing a Sustainability and Innovation Awards for our next conference in Zurich. So Allied members listening, please do get your entries in. Speak to Ilanik at FCSI EAME. So, but that's a great question. We have another comment or question from Magnus. Why not including warewashing? I think you have referenced warewashing, of course, as a big part of, and it is a significant part, isn't it?
Yeah, so warewashing was in the model, so it was an integral focus of the PhD. Same on the FEA course. There's a whole module dedicated to that, so that's a 12-hour course. Can be done at
Right.
your own pace. You don't need to listen to me go on for that long.
Well, that was
But yeah, warewashing is interesting because I do find that it's the most overlooked part. So I think everybody's starting to get now the huge impact of refrigeration, cooking, and warming. But I feel like it's because operators think they can't do anything about warewashing. They just press the button and it does its thing, and there's no ability to sort of tweak the operation. So I feel like it's quite a challenge, but there are lots of things that can be done, and yeah, do get in touch if you need to know a little bit more.
okay. Fantastic. I'll close with one last question. What are some quick wins that hospitality businesses can implement today to start saving energy without significant capital investment?
Yes, so obviously training straight away, that is a small amount of investment. It also gets over the problem of staff retention. People think it's either or, not going to invest in the training because they'll leave. But when you invest in them, they stay. They feel more valued. So I always go for that training. One fairly recent innovation that I absolutely love is the concept of a smart socket where they're only £20, but you can set them up to turn things on and turn things off with API keys for things like room booking systems. So some of the football stadiums that we work at is perfect. The exec boxes have got lots of their champagne fridges. They've got some warming
Oh,
stuff. They're
yeah,
lovely.
I have one here.
It
Yes.
is. And they're on 24 hours a day. And actually, some of my clients now were paying energy managers to go around and take things off. But now that I've got these smart sockets, you can put room booking information directly into it. It's great for hotels as well. So 20 quid a socket, and you can suddenly have all the abilities of a timer, but
Mhm.
flush against the wall, looking pretty slick, and they can just turn things on and off remotely. And you don't need to update them for things like British summertime because you can just do it online or through an app. So that is a really good one for low cost, and you can put all sorts from bottle fridges. People do get
Bottle
quite
fridges.
cross with me about that because they say, "Oh, it will break," but I've got lots of evidence to say that they don't for this particular use. Um, and yeah, coffee machines, vending machines, hot water boilers, door heaters, loads of stuff like that can go on that kind of system, and it's pretty cheap.
Right. Yeah, I want to link on that, Sam, because I can think of many establishments that leave certainly their bottle coolers on overnight, and they're only operational from break till lunchtime,
Yeah.
and they insist on leaving these things just on, which is a bone of contention. I think you've captured so much, Sam, and what's been really fantastic today is the emphasis on the human resource, isn't it? If you think, I think you quoted, the overall 70% attainment of better energy consumption is on behavior, which is important. And I'm loving the way the praise element and the not sort of dismissing staff for being useless in the kitchen, but praising those who are performing very well in a positive way. That positive message then does filter through to the rest of the organizational team. I could go on for hours now because I've written about 20 pages of notes here, which all need to be discussed with you. So I'll be calling you about 4 o'clock this afternoon, Sam. We'll sort of bring this to a close now, but we'll remind people that this will be turned into a blockbuster video. And will be available in due course. And I'm sure we'll get a bulletin out to everybody attending today that they can access this. I would just like to say, Sam, thank you so much. I mean, this was both enlightening and intriguing. There's lots of stuff there, which is, and I think the crucial thing, what's of real interest, is that your organization not only has the real knowledge, but you're demonstrating tangible results. And I think this is where, certainly from a consultant point of view, we've been greenwashed for years, so we don't really know. We listen to some great statements, and I believe everything as a rule. It's a Welsh thing, I guess, but it's the results that count. And I think the sales pitch for people in your sector, if you're going to attain savings, I think this is what's going to work better now in the current climate. Whereas we're all paying lip service to it, but not actually doing anything about it. So basically, thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate all the work that's gone into today. Before we depart, I've mentioned the session has been recorded. And to speak now or forever hold your peace. Can I just say a big thank you to all of you for attending? I think who was on at 4 o'clock this morning. So yeah, I've been moaning because it's 8 o'clock in the UK. So thank you for making that effort. those in countries that are just finishing for the day, have a good Friday. So I really want to express a heartfelt thanks to all of you participating. It's truly appreciated. Goes to show that we're a far-reaching society and family. We certainly do share, support, and inspire, and so appreciate that. So I'd like to wish you all a great Friday and every success on your reducing carbon journey. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you very much. Goodbye.